Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel today. In today's video, we're going to tackle a somewhat controversial topic all around how the Western leadership is running scared at the moment. And this is all around something that you've probably seen on the news without really understanding what's going on. And this is in the African country of Niger.
Niger.
It was meant to be a rally to support Niger's coup leaders, but it turned into a violent protest against France, with some demonstrators storming the French embassy in Niamey.
I would like to say to the European Union, the African Union and ECOWAS, please stay out of our business.
The French flag was replaced by another flag of the same colors, Russia.
So what have we seen on the news then? Let's actually break this down. All we've seen constantly is that there's been a military coup, and it's the same wording all the time. The democratically elected leader has been ousted and put into prison, and now there are these, this group that's running rampant in the country. And of course, they are asking for all Western military bases emptied. They want the embassies emptied, and they want Niger to be run by Niger. And of course, the response from the US and from France and some of the other countries is that they will not remove their troops from the country because they are there to fight terrorism. However, with all of these things, I try not to be political on them, but I like to look at, I always ask the same question. People always say to me, how do I go so deep into stories and find all this stuff? And it's actually very simple, and you can do this for yourself. I always look at every single story with a simple question in mind. What is the true purpose? And I'm always looking at the financial aspect, because in my time doing this, I find that if I just look at the money and follow the money, I usually get to the truth or the heart of the matter. So what did I actually uncover then? France gets most of their uranium from Niger.
If you're watching this from France, you'll want to pay attention.
Niger is the world's 7th largest uranium producer, and France, which relies on nuclear energy for about 70% of its power, is a key importer.
And the new government, however you want to call them, in Niger has said they are not going to be sending this uranium or exporting it anymore to France, which of course is a huge importer of uranium. And the reason they're saying that is because they're saying that France has been pillaging their country for a long time. So I wanted to look into that. And also there was some very strange things going on with ECOWAS, which is your Economic Community of Western Africa, and how they instantly all were reading out these statements, which sounded very Western in nature, I must say, saying that they are going to be organizing military to go in and remove this new leadership right away. So they were organizing all this military.
The US, France and Italy saw Niger as a key ally in the fight against Islamist insurgents in the Sahel region. In response to the coup, France and the EU have suspended aid to Niger, and this could cause Niger's new leaders to review their participation and support of the migrant policy. And this could lead to more migrants entering Europe.
Another thing was the Western media said, and it was actually NATO and the European Union that put this out, saying that they shouldn't even wait for an answer and they should get their military in right away.
I spoke with President Bazoum earlier this morning and made clear that the United States resolutely supports him as the democratically elected president of Niger. We call for his immediate release.
The regional bloc has given Niger's coup leaders an ultimatum: either release and reinstate deposed President Mohamed Bazoum in 1 week, or face military action.
In the event the authorities' demands are not met within 1 week, take all measures necessary to restore constitutional order in the Republic of Niger. Such measures may include the use of force. To this effect, the chiefs of defense staff of ECOWAS are to meet immediately.
Diplomats from the United States, the European Union, and the United Nations attended the summit.
And again, I thought that was very unusual, why NATO, the EU, and some of the countries would instantly say that. Like, what is it? In my mind, I'm saying, what has it got to do with them? There must be something else to this.
The United States has also said US President Joe Biden's administration is committed to a diplomatic resolution and said Niger was a partner it did not want to lose.
Work with ECOWAS, with the African Union, with other partners around the world, as well as regional partners, to get this situation back on track. And
it was at that point that I started to look at all of the raw materials and things like that. And here's the details on it. Niger is the world's 4th largest producer of uranium, which of course is being used for nuclear energy and plants now. Even though Germany closed there, this is the bizarre thing that I mean, I just can't believe people still believe this, but Germany closed their nuclear reactors to help fight climate change. Well, that's complete nonsense, because nuclear energy, I mean, this is just basic. I thought everyone knew this. Even kids in science class learn this. Nuclear energy doesn't actually produce any CO2. It actually produces less CO2 than solar and wind farms. So I think this is one of the reasons then that we are seeing France panicking so much about their loss of the uranium supply. And even Uganda has got involved, the Ugandan president, and saying that we are happy, we've got all these reserves of uranium, we're happy for you, and I think it was Sweden or Norway, one of those Nordic countries, to come in, but we want a fair share of the uranium. And he says, and you can actually see this statement online, he said that of all those 2 or 3 countries, none of them wanted to accept the terms. And I guess that makes sense if France has been mining uranium since 1960, 1960s. That's over 60 years or thereabouts, 6 decades of getting this uranium at very low prices. And yet, if you think about citizens in Niger, 10% of them actually have access to electricity, even though they are sitting on huge reserves. They just don't have the infrastructure, I think, in order to build these sort of factories or build these power plants. And I think this is another form of tension. Just reading all the different articles and forums and things like that online. I mean, I started last night actually, and almost did an all-nighter, not quite, but then all day today, just been researching, reading into this and getting different opinions on it, because it is a very controversial and difficult subject. But that seems to be the gist of it. A lot of people feel as though France has been taking all of these resources and not really giving much back to the country. But I'm going to talk about that as well, and how France has said that they are, but we'll come on to that. The other thing is oil. Niger has about 1.3 million barrels of oil, so they've got pretty good reserves there. And yet again, who do we find? We find France's Total Energies company is the largest oil exporter from the region. So they are taking, according to the details online, about 80% of Niger's oil. Okay, so we've got most of the uranium, we have 80% of the oil. You see where this is going. The next one is phosphate. Niger is the world's 5th largest producer of phosphate. And France is one of the major imports of phosphate. In fact, France's OCP company is the world's largest phosphate producer, and it gets most of its phosphate from Niger. Finally then, just to put the nail in the coffin here, gold. Okay, Niger is a producer of gold, and France, it claims, takes over 50% of their gold from them. Now, there was some things on the other side of this, in terms of France claiming that they send money to 14 African nations as, well, I guess we can use the word compensation here. So here it is actually, we've got it. So it's called the ODA program. Benin, Burkina Faso, we'll mention them in a moment, as well as Mali. There's some very interesting developments there in terms of military, and we'll come to that. Cameroon, Chad, Comoros, the Congo, the Ivory Coast, Djibouti, Guinea, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, and Senegal. So France is saying that they're not exploiting all of these countries and that they're actually helping to develop these countries and have been since the 19th century. Well, that's quite a long time. That's over 100 years. So just how much work is being done, I'll leave that up to you. I'm not going to comment on that. Feel free to drop a comment below. But I did find another thing that I wanted to tie into this, which I found was very, very interesting. And that was that in 2017, Niger's then president, and I don't know how to pronounce this, but Mahamadou Issoufou accused France of neo-colonialism and said that he wanted France to pay for the resources that they were extracting from his country. And then it says that he was very quickly replaced by the pro-Western Mohamed Assam in 2020, which is the president that has just been removed from power now. And of course, the USA has gotten heavily involved already, and they are saying that he needs to be put back in place, as well as the European Union, a lot of other nations.
I spoke with President Bazoum earlier this morning and made clear that the United States resolutely supports him as the democratically elected president of Niger. We call for his immediate release.
And this is where the military conflict aspect is coming in now. And there's been a lot of videos which I've seen on alternative media platforms, which you may not have seen. And actually, what we are seeing in these regions, not just in Niger, but Mali, Burkina Faso, etc., and why I think that the West are trying to actually get a handle on this very quickly is because if they don't, I think this is going to spread. So what we're seeing now is a lot of parades and these French flags and other flags that are coming down. And what we are seeing going up is these Russian flags.
Another reason why the West is worried about the rising Russian influence in the region is because Niger has served as a hub for foreign forces fighting a regional Islamist insurgency.
And of course, we already know that the Wagner Group has a very strong presence in the region, and gold mining and security, well, whether it is security, I'm not exactly sure. I can't comment on it because I haven't looked into it, but I know they're very heavily involved in these regions.
Russia also has a role to play in the region, but it's the presence of the Russian mercenary Wagner Group in the region has worried Western allies who see it as a threat to their influence.
So what it looks like to me is that Western powers are actually losing their grip on certain countries within Africa, and you're seeing other countries coming in, such as China, such as Russia.
This comes after Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke with Mali's military leader on phone regarding the coup. This adds to the West's growing fears of a Russian influence in the region.
And of course, we've already established in other videos that African nations, as well as South American and a huge amount of other countries actually, are moving very heavily towards BRICS, and they want this BRICS membership. So I think we're seeing more of a power play actually happening here, and the pendulum really swinging. So it doesn't surprise me that we're seeing all these threats of immediate military action to re-establish the previous president, because if Europe and the West in general starts to lose access to the resources, which, let's just be honest, these resources should be used by Africans for Africa to develop Africa. And I also find it strange how the new Italian Prime Minister has done this U-turn, where when she was trying to get elected, she was attacking Macron and a lot of the EU very, very fiercely, and saying that they are, Macron is responsible, and France is responsible for all this child labor in the Congo, and 6-year-old kids are dying every day from mining all these materials for renewable energy and all these other things. Well, very quickly U-turned now. And there's even, I believe, an Italian military base in Niger now. So it's just interesting how these things are developing. It's also interesting how she claimed that the reason that France was so heavily involved in removing Gaddafi from Libya was because Libya was about to make Italy energy independent. So she claimed that they scuppered that deal, and then they created these terrorist cells in Libya in order that the French could then be the saviors, and then, you know, these terrorist cells went over to other countries and all sorts of other things. It's very interesting when you see these videos from the campaign trail compared to some of the things that she says now, and, you know, even sits there with them all on the board, and I just find it very, very interesting. But I wanted to ask some of the AI softwares what they thought about the situation and how they thought it would develop. And I thought it was fascinating, the answers that I got from some of them. And it was all about, in fact, I wrote this one down, and they focus quite heavily on the trend towards de-colonialization and self-determination. And it said, this was from Bard AI, that is likely to continue in Africa, and it's possible that more countries will seek to reduce their dependence on the West in years to come. Many Africans have a deep mistrust and resentment towards the West. The mistrust is rooted in the history of colonialism and imperialism, and it is exacerbated by the current state of global inequality. But coming back to the point I made on military action then, this is quite concerning, and why I think you should just be aware of it is that this could create another front, you see, especially because Burkina Faso and Mali now have offered fighters to Niger if they are attacked either by ECOWAS or the French military or any other Western military. And it's not just that. If you see the support that these groups are getting throughout the country now, throughout the region, this could become quite a hotbed for military conflict. So none of this should surprise you, because I've talked about it for a while now and said that we're in this era of the fourth turning cycle where we're going to see a lot of these things developing. We're going to see a lot of insecurity, a lot more military conflict in different regions. Ukraine, Russia is just the start. We're seeing, and even we talked about Poland sending all these troops to the border now. That's happening at quite a rapid rate in terms of that response. We're seeing conscription in other countries. Now we're seeing that there might be something happening in this sort of region of Africa. We're even seeing cartels now moving into other regions that weren't there before. We're seeing organized crime gangs from certain parts of Eastern Europe moving quite heavily into Western Europe. We're seeing police getting overrun with certain crime. We're seeing all of this deterioration now and breakdown in, I guess we can say, the social order that has been in place for a long time. And this is quite common when we go through periods like this. And it's also quite common for countries that have a lot of power and control and resources from other countries to want to hold on to that power and resources and control. So I hope that gives you a little bit of insight now then into what's actually happening in Niger. And it's not always the way that we think or we see it. Oftentimes we just hear these media reports and we don't really question it. We might just hear it, you might see it and think that it is the way the media portrays it and says it is. But usually you've got to dig a little bit deeper and really look into it, and that's how you end up with the truth. Always ask the question, and you follow the money, you follow the resources, and it'll give you a little bit of an idea of what is really going on. So thank you so much for watching today. Really appreciate you as subscribers. Take care, God bless, and I'll see you tomorrow.